Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today I am joined by author Josh Winning. And get ready, campers, because we are headed to summer camp.
Whoop
Welcome to the
whoop.
show.
Hi.
Woo!
We're back in the freezer.
We are going to the isolation cabin.
Yes. It's so great to be back here. Thank you so much for having me back on your show.
Oh, of course. It's so fun to have you back on. I'm glad we got to catch up at StokerCon
Yes.
too. That was fun.
Yeah, and we met like you were pretty much the second person that I bumped into on the first day of the con. So it was like fresh and, fresh off the plane, feeling good. So that was a good time for us to meet, I think.
Yeah. Well, and you had so many stories. You had already had so many experiences at that point.
Oh yeah, we'd been on the road trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'd been like to the Grand Canyon, obviously, because that's what you do when you go to America, and Idlewild, which turned out to be like this sort of well, we stayed in a hotel that turned out to be kind of like a weed retreat, which were
I had no idea that existed when you told me that.
yeah.
It's like a weed themed hotel.
Yeah, the breakfast. The breakfast was a waffle shaped like a marijuana leaf and dyed green.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was very cool.
But I just love knowing that stoner hotels exist.
Yeah, it was a shock to us as well. Like we went into the games room and our eyes just shriveled into raisins. It was the smell of weed was just so strong. And we got woken up on the first night by people throwing up in the room above us, where I assume that just meant they'd smoked way too much.
Oh my gosh. But we are here not to talk about weed, but to talk about summer camp because you have a book coming out.
I do. Yeah,
Heads will roll.
they're gonna roll.
Oh my gosh, I'll tell our listeners about it.
It's sort of my love letter to Friday the 13th, which is uh, the slasher franchise I grew up with, and I've always been obsessed with summer camps ever since because they just look like great places to die. So Heads Will Roll is sort of like my modern spin on that whole setup of a bunch of people going to a summer camp in the middle of nowhere and then dying in horrific ways. Um, so Heads Will Roll is about a sitcom star who gets cancelled because she tweets something, shall we say, ill-advised, and her whole life blows up. She loses her show, she loses her partner, her home, loses her money. So she decides to just get away from the world, checks into Camp Castaway, which is a digital detox camp in upstate New York. Um, when she gets there, she starts to suspect that everybody else at camp has also been cancelled for something. Nobody uses their real names, so it's obviously impossible to verify. Nobody has their phones because it's digital detox camp. No way to sort of like sneakily Google anybody at the camp. And then campers start to go missing, and it seems like they're being cancelled for good.
Mm. Dun dun
Dun,
dun.
dun,
Are summer camps a thing in the UK? Like, do you guys go to like sleepaway camp in the woods? Is that common?
no, we don't have like the organized sort of like system that you guys have. We have center parks, but that's a chain and it's very much family oriented. So if you go to center parks, there are hundreds of cabins in the wood. Um, and you kind of go along, you can like hire a cabin or a chalet, stay with a bunch of friends, stay with your family. There are all these fun activities like zip wiring, zip lining, um, you know, uh, fishing, climbing trees, mini golf. They've got like sports bars and restaurants, and it's very much like a safe place to go to get away with your family, sort of
Mm.
like in the wild. But yeah, we don't have a place that children are sent to
Yeah.
spend the summer. you know. As far as I know, we don't really have that. Yeah, it seems like quite a specifically American thing.
It might be. I did go to summer camp a few times. It was through my church, so it was like a religious run
Yeah.
camp, and it was for like a week in the summer. Like our church would have like our week that we were set to go, and we would meet up with like other teens from other churches.
Yeah, so you were, like, in a cabin with a bunch of other kids and stuff?
Yeah,
Ah, and was it fun?
but it was fun. I mean, there was a lot of religious activity. Like we would have to like wake up and do like prayer and Bible verses and then go to like preaching like in the middle of the day and then like several sessions of it at night, which is a whole thing we can get
Yeah.
into, but we won't, not on this one. But I mean, there still was the like, you could go swimming, you could go in the lake, you could go on a hike, you could play, volleyball. Like it was still like all the trappings of a
Yeah.
summer camp.
Was it like religious themed swimming? Like religious themed, football or
You had to say verses as you jumped in. No, but it was very segregated, like this was the girls' time to go swimming. And if you were like a guy, you could not be geographically anywhere close to where you could see
Ah,
the girls swimming, even though what we had to swim in was like a drowning
yeah,
hazard.
yeah. Which is just how Jesus likes it.
Yeah. But I loved in Heads Will Roll that it is this summer camp formula, but for adults, because when you see summer camp stories, I mean, you're talking about, teens and usually teens working it. And if there are adults, it's like the person that runs the camp and like the cook and like the
Yeah,
nurse. But this is
yeah.
like, we have a way to have adults as the campers, which was
Yeah. It was a weird one because in my mind, it wasn't when I first started plotting the book and like starting to write the book, it was really just a wellness retreat,
Mhm.
which I've done. I did a wellness retreat in Wales, which was really cool. It was very much like a spiritual retreat, which I was sent on as a journalist. It was one of the first ever um, sort of assignments that I had as a young journalist, and it was this like manor house in the middle of the Welsh countryside. It was beautiful, and we did things like drawing auras and um, like writing down sort of not sins, but like writing down things that we wanted to leave behind, and we like
Mhm.
threw those things in the fire and did like a whole ceremony. So I was kind of drawing from that when I was imagining Camp Castaway, but my
Okay.
editor, who is American, I had two editors on this, but one of them, he kind of said, "Let's really play up the summer camp vibe and make it somewhere that is really like a wish fulfillment type scenario where people reading it, it would seem like quite an idyllic thing to do. Get rid of your phones, live
Yeah.
wild and free for a while." So I kind of smushed those two things together, and
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of ended up as maybe more of a summer camp than it initially was.
It's interesting. I definitely do see the wellness retreat DNA in
Yeah,
there.
cool.
Um, it's so cool. Do you remember what was your aura?
I don't remember.
Did you have to find like other people's auras?
Yeah, you kind of
Okay.
was it in a circle, or you were paired up and you were given a sheet of paper with like the outline of a head on it, which is kind of sinister. And
Okay.
then you sat opposite your partner, who was obviously a complete stranger you'd never met before, and then you just drew their auras. And I don't know, I didn't fully buy into that side of it. It was almost like doing homework for a teacher who was going to give you an A no matter what. So I just sort of drew anything, and the teacher, the woman who was lovely, sort of said, "Oh yeah, I can see some blue in there or some green in there." So okay, great. But she was very insightful. Like she was a spiritual leader, um, the woman who ran it, and she did have some like just an ability to to look into you. And I remember doing an activity where you kind of meet your spirit guides, and I kind of like was trying to get into it, and I was like, well, I feel like maybe I've got two spirit guides. And she said to me, that's not surprising because you you're constantly second guessing yourself and you never make a real decision, like something about that. And I was like, oh shit, how the fuck did you figure that out? Maybe I do have spirit guides. Or maybe she was just very good at her job.
Yeah. You felt seen, you felt attacked.
I felt both of those things. Yeah.
Well, another thing I loved is Willow, your protagonist, horror fan.
Yes.
Horror was a
She
horror book fan.
Yes, that's the thing, is people often, when they think about horror fans, they just think of movies, but horror books are awesome. There are so many great horror books out there. This year is crazy for horror books.
It is.
We've got new books from Paul Tremblay, two new books from Stephen Graham Jones. We've got a new
Yeah.
Josh Malerman. We've got a new CJ Lead. There's so many
Yeah.
amazing books coming out.
They truly
Um,
are.
yeah, horror rules the world.
I saw a tweet, might have been, give us some time this week, but it's like, why don't we have a celebrity who, there's like the Oprah book club and like the Reese book club. Why don't we have like a horror book club run by a celebrity? Where's our patron saint of like
Completely.
genre horror book club? It would be
Yeah,
Willow in your world, but like, where's our Willow?
I know. I feel like Diablo Cody would be the perfect patron saint of
Mm,
horror. I feel like she's been done dirty. Like she basically got sort of blamed for Jennifer's Body having a really misogynistic marketing campaign and then failing at the cinema. But she could have been like such a
and then everyone
great
slept on Lisa Frankenstein.
right. They really did. So if only I feel like Diablo Cody could probably still do it.
Yeah. Diablo
Come on,
Cody,
Diablo.
we are reaching out to you humbly, asking you to start
Yes,
a
please
horror
be.
book club with your client.
Yeah.
One of the things I remember from Willow, and I wanted to ask if you share this opinion as well, is that she preferred the even numbered Friday the 13th films. And I need to know.
Yes. Yes. That was one of the things that I don't know if other writers feel this way, but sometimes you put something in and you're like, am I just doing this just for me? Like, is this just a bit too gross that I've put that in there because that is fully my opinion? It's not just the opinion of the character I'm supposed to be writing. But I do think that even numbered Friday the 13th are the best ones. Like, what's your favorite?
Jason Takes Manhattan.
Do you know what? I had a feeling you were going to say that.
I rewatched it. I rewatched the first, I guess, yeah, the first eight within the past couple weeks since I knew we were going to have this talk because all the ones after that just aren't easily available for streaming. Um but I went into it and I'm like, at this point, Jason Takes Manhattan is my favorite. And I
Oh,
rewatched it and I
wow.
was like, nope, perfection. No, no, it's my
Yeah.
favorite.
It's nuts, and it's just unapologetically the formula, isn't it? It just doesn't mess around.
Yeah. I don't want to hear people's complaints about how it's not really in Manhattan and it's on a boat. Like don't I don't care.
Yeah, I respect that. There's
What
there's
about
enough of
you?
it. I mean, Jason on a boat is still pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I really yo-yo between 2 and 6. I think
Okay.
2 was great because it had Ginny as the final girl, and she is pretty much my favorite ever, maybe? Like, maybe just one below Gale Weathers.
She's smart.
Yeah, she's super smart. She's the first she's the first character to like psychoanalyze Jason. She doesn't just brand him as a monster. She's like, do you think that could really mess him up seeing his mum get decapitated by somebody on a beach, you know? So she's awesome. But I think part 6 is just so fun, and it's such a post A Nightmare on Elm Street horror film because it suddenly looks a bit like that, a bit like Wes Craven style, like beautiful filters on the visuals and a bit more funny. The teens are a bit more savvy. So yeah,
Okay.
that one's definitely up there as well.
You have to refresh my memory. Which one is 6?
Oh wow, that's the one that makes
And
him finally into an actual zombie.
okay.
It's when so
It's
grown
Jason
up
Lives.
Tommy. Yes, Jason lives.
Okay.
Yeah, it's grown up
Yes.
Tommy
Okay.
goes back to Jason's grave because he needs to prove to himself that Jason's dead, so he digs him up, which I've got to
Yes.
respect. And then lightning revives him, and he comes back and starts attacking everyone. But it's the first one that had actual campers, like real, like the kids were actually at camp when Jason was kind of marauding through.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, so it had a completely different feel to it than the previous ones.
Willow and Josh confirmed even numbered Friday the
Yeah.
13th fans.
Put on a t-shirt. It's the truth.
Oh man, what's your least favorite?
Can I include the remake?
Yeah,
Does that count?
that one.
Is it canon? Because
I think
technically
it is
it
canon.
okay. Because technically it is. I think it's like that is technically number 12, which is it? I can't remember. I think it might be number 12.
Is it 11? 'Cause what came after isn't Jason X 10, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
and
then
then it's
okay.
Freddy
Oh, then
versus
Freddy versus
Jason.
Jason. You're right. And
Yeah.
then the remake. So yeah, you're right. It is 12.
So that slightly ruins the theory, but it's
Sorry.
dreadful. And it's just sort of like really quite misogynistic, but it's like that was an element of the 80s films, but
Mhm.
this was made in 2009 and that times have moved on, guys, you know.
Yeah. I feel like it had a 2000s flavor of misogyny though. Like they're like, "Oh
Right.
yeah, this is the flavor we were playing with at the time."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why films like Wrong Turn are great because they don't have any of that in them. They kind of manage to skirt around that problematic gender
They are
stereotypes.
they're just too busy. Like they are getting attacked like
Yes.
constantly. They are constantly on the run.
Yeah, they've got shit to
There's just
do.
no time.
There's no time for boobs. What's your least favorite one?
Is it God, this always happens to me. I always watch them so close together that they all blend together. I want to say maybe it's for 5? Is that the one where it's not Jason, it's somebody
Yeah,
else? Yeah, I think
it's
it's
like a
that
crazy
one.
doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great.
Well, it's one of those like if I had paid money to see this at a movie theater and I was sold a Jason movie and it ended up
Hmm.
being this, I would be mad.
Yeah, because it still uses the mask, and the mask is still on the
Yeah.
poster,
Yeah.
and it's called Friday the 13th. And it also has a really horrible. Doesn't the guy gets bullied and like really quite horrifically murdered quite early on,
Yeah.
and it's just like that. It felt really like dark in a way that isn't part of this franchise. It was horrible.
So, not my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we talk about some movies that go into summer camp horror?
Let's do it.
I mean, we have been talking about Friday the 13th, so I think that goes without goes
Yeah.
without saying. But also horror cult classic Sleepaway Camp.
Yes. So, how recently have you watched Sleepaway Camp?
I watched it for the first time, I want to say like 4-ish years ago. And I feel like I've watched it since then at least once or twice.
Okay.
How about you?
I haven't seen it since I was a teenager. It was really, really hard to find over here for the longest time.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think it actually got a release over here. Like it was 1983, so yeah, maybe it was just too low budget. It just didn't pick up distribution.
Yeah.
So I only saw it because I managed to get hold of a US VHS, and I had a VHS player that happened to be able to play US tapes. So I saw it on this like really wibbly wobbly imported copy, and
Wait,
it
was it different? Like you had to have a different player for US tapes?
yeah, they're region coded.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. It's
I
the
feel
same
like
with DVDs.
I was like, actually, yeah, now that you're saying this, I'm remembering that, yeah, that is how it
Yeah,
is.
it just point blank wouldn't play it if it was a different tape player.
Interesting.
Yeah, like a xenophobic tape player.
Like, we can't have
That's not
this.
from my country. Yeah.
Like, sorry, no can do for you, man. Don't understand.
Lost in translation. Um, it's a really like it's an interesting one because it is canon, but it's so problematic. There's some really like not okay stuff in that film.
No. I know there's been a lot of retrospectives on it. It's on my TBR, but BJ and Harmony Colangelo recently wrote a book um
Mm.
about Sleepaway Camp that I want to check out because I definitely enjoyed their perspective. I listened to, I think they did it on their podcast, This Ends at Prom.
Oh, cool. I've not heard of that. I'll definitely have to give that a listen.
It's very fun. They're teen girl movies. BJ is showing her wife, who's a trans woman, so she did not like grow up watching teen girl movies. So it's like
Right.
them going and it's like showing her these movies for sometimes the first time through this
That
lens.
sounds
So
great.
yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, awesome.
So yeah, they both wrote a book on Sleepaway Camp. I want to check out
Mm.
that came out this year.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
I watched Final Girls a handful of years ago too, and that's a new favorite.
Absolutely.
Just as
That is one of my
ugh,
all-time favorite films ever. It's like such a sweet slasher film. It's about I love the meta postmodern fourth wall breaking aspect of it where they get sucked into a real life slasher film, um,
yes.
which is obviously amazing. But I love the emotional layer on top of that where the main character gets drawn into the slasher film that her mum starred in. And so when she's inside the movie, she's there with the character that her mum played. So it's not really her mum, but it looks just like her, and it's got a
Yeah,
real like pathos to it, which is lovely.
it is. Oh my gosh. I was not expecting to cry going into that
Yeah,
movie, but I definitely did. And you're right, it balances the meta angles and it's so funny. And if you're someone who's watched a lot of these summer camp horror movies that they're spoofing, it's hilarious and spot on. And yeah, it just manages the humor and the heart so
yeah,
perfectly.
yeah. There's that moment where I don't know what the actor's called, but she does like she's meant to like seduce the killer into coming into the house, so she's wearing like oven gloves that are like taped to her hands, and she's doing like a crazy dance, which is just so funny.
And then do you ever watch Stage Fright? The one about the drama camp?
Yeah, I saw that a really long time ago, and I've got
Yeah.
absolutely zero memory of it whatsoever. Yeah.
I also watched it a really long time ago, so I can't think of specifics, but one thing I do remember is that they had in the I don't know if it was the place where they perform or the mess hall, but they had all these posters for I'm assuming like plays that they've done and all of them were just like a little off, like they couldn't say Phantom of the Opera or Cats, so it was just like a little off from that. And I remember finding that extremely entertaining,
Yeah.
just staring at the posters.
So was it like it was called
Ghost,
Bats or
ghost,
something? Or
ghost at the theater,
oh,
ghost of the
amazing.
theater, or something. Yeah, bats.
There's some like sexy people dressed up as bats.
You know what? Would watch.
Yes, I would too.
Then there was the second Fear Street movie, the Fear Street 1978.
Adored
I do.
it.
I loved that whole trilogy.
Yeah. I think the second one might be the best one.
Really,
Yeah.
I think I like 1666 is my
Oh,
top.
really?
Yeah,
It ties it together so beautifully.
it does.
And I loved the whole witch angle was
Yeah.
brilliant. Um, Yeah, I know, you're right. 1666 is awesome as well. I think maybe I'm more
I
of
mean,
like a
there's not a weak one. Like, I would say
yeah,
my second
totally.
favorite was 94, but that doesn't mean I don't love 78. I still
You
think
hated 78. Just
that's
admit
not what
it.
I'm saying. They're all good. They're all really good. This was a tough decision.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just such a clever trilogy. It was such an event when
Mhm.
it came out and
Yeah.
so fun.
We have Prom Queen to
Oh,
look forward
yes.
to. I reread
Yes.
it, or I know I read it. I checked it out from my library,
Oh, nice.
uh, because the Fear Street books are quite pricey now.
Yeah. We never had them over here. It's like we totally missed out.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
They really need to work on getting them all in ebook versions
Mm,
because there's so many of them that you have to buy like the original paperback,
yeah.
which good luck. Um,
Crazy.
my library has a lot of them, but I tried to get there is a Fear Street summer camp book that I tried to get through my library, and someone like they checked it out to someone who just never returned it. And I'm
Ah,
like, it's the only copy they have.
oh
I'm
my
like, this
God. They
whole
knew what it
area.
was worth.
I know. I'm like,
They
ah.
sold that thing. Yeah. They did re-release a couple of Fear Street books over here, but they were in like a really bizarrely big format. It was like an omnibus. They did 3 books in one, and it was really big. And
That's interesting. What are the books in it?
The New Girl, The Surprise
Okay.
Party, The Overnight, and Missing, and they're
Okay,
all
yeah.
R.L. Stein stories.
Okay. I think those are original ones. Um,
Ah.
there's Return to Fear Street, which is like new books he's written. And then I was planning on watching the American Horror Story 1984 season, and unfortunately, I did not.
You
Have
just
you
didn't
seen
watch
it?
it.
It just didn't happen. I was too busy on my
Yeah.
Friday the 13th rewatch.
Yeah. There's a lot to watch right now. It has like the coolest opening credits of any of the American Horror Story series, I think. Like the
Really?
remix, because it's the same song every time, but they just kind of remix
Hmm.
it differently. They did a
Hmm.
really cool remix for this because it's obviously 84. Um, I really liked it at first, but it just started to get spiral out of control a little bit. It was one of
Mm,
those. It was one of those
sounds
things where it's
familiar.
like once people come back from the dead, you can't
Ah,
really go anywhere because there's no peril left.
yeah.
And so it kind of got
Ah,
bogged down by that and like around episode 5 or 6, and then I just didn't finish it, sadly.
oh.
Yeah.
That's normally how I feel about most American Horror Story seasons. I hate to say, I'm like, starts out so good, opening credits,
Mm,
fantastic vibes, loses its way about halfway through.
totally. Yeah. It's like maybe it's a victim of that the season length.
Maybe.
Because seasons can be a lot shorter now. I wonder if that's a show that just needs to be 6 episodes. Just cram them in.
Someone needs to rein Ryan Murphy in. That's what needs to
Yeah.
happen. Someone needs to give him a hard limit. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing is, though, it can pay off. Like, my favorite of what I've seen is Asylum.
mhm.
Um, and that one does go, that one kind of just throws everything in there, but it kind of works. And like, the final episode had me bawling, which I wasn't expecting. But yeah, so that kind of, it kind of paid off in that season, but then other seasons it's like, no, come on, just editorialize. What's the message?
Yeah. I loved Coven. I think I love like witchy
Yeah.
characters.
Yeah, and witches are just awesome. And Stevie Nicks was in it, so that's
Yeah.
always going to be a good thing. So the big one for me is Adam's Family Values, which
Yes.
on the surface isn't a summer camp story, but like Wednesday and Pugsley spend half the film at Camp Chippewa, because Evil Debbie, aka like the best villain in a movie ever, she convinces the parents to ship them off to summer camp, which is like it's just such a great idea because obviously the Adams family are misfits, and so putting them into that shiny, happy, lakeside, idyllic location with, bratty theatre kids essentially. It's just so, so funny.
I'm a little sad that Deb had to die just because I feel like she would have fit in with the Adams family. Like we're not so different, you and I, you know?
That's so true. She just made the mistake of trying to kill them all, like for realsies.
But knowing the Adamses, like I really feel like they would have let that go. They'd been like, it happens to
Yeah,
the best of us. Like we've all been there. Okay.
I think it was a
Um,
style. I think it was a style thing. Morticia just couldn't get past the
the
pastels.
pastels.
Yeah,
Understood. As someone
yeah.
who looks awful in pastels, I understand. Um, but yeah, I mean the iconic play that for some reason at this summer camp is about the first Thanksgiving. A lot of question marks
Yeah,
there, but it
yeah.
just made for such an iconic scene that I'm fine with the direction it took.
And it's Christine Baranski
Yes,
as
I
one
am
of
always
the.
excited when she shows up in
Oh,
something.
I love her. Ever since Sybil, the sitcom, she's just my number one. Dr. Dick.
Just as unhinged camp a co-owner person running the camp. I don't know.
Yeah, with oh, he was an Ally McBeal. Peter. Oh, complete. I can never remember his name, but he's very funny as well. He was an Ally McBeal as one of the eccentric senior lawyers. I wanted to mention The Blackening,
Yeah.
which technically isn't a summer camp, but it is a cabin in the woods, and it does sort of play around with horror tropes. So it's sort of like it's a play on that the black character dies first trope. So all the characters in the film are played by people of color, and they go away to a cabin in the woods. It's like a luxury retreat for a bunch of friends, and when they get there, they discover this like really creepy room that has a board game in it called The Blackening that is basically like trivia about black media, and if you get a question wrong, you die. So it's like a fun scream twist on that horror trope, and it's very very funny. Um, and I've never heard of her before, but Ex Mayo, are they a comedian or?
I don't
But
know.
extremely funny, like stole the whole film. So even though it's not quite summer camp, it's definitely summer camp adjacent, and I really recommend it.
That's been on my list. I need to watch it.
It's perfect if you've just watched a bunch of Friday the 13th films, I think, because it's like a direct descendant of those, I think.
Oh, perfect.
I found a couple that I've never seen, but they look hilarious. There's a film called Twisted Nightmare from 1987. Apparently, it was shot in like 1982, but it wasn't released until 5 years later. And all the clips I've seen online are hilarious because it's like terrible acting, um, very derivative of Friday the 13th. People in the summer camp, a guy gets bullied and he goes running into a barn and then he somehow gets set on fire. Um, and then, the following year, everyone starts to die kind of thing. So that looks like something worth checking out purely for low budget nonsense value. Um, and then there's Cheerleader Camp from
Okay.
1988, which is like finalists for the Miss Cheerleader USA contest all go to this camp to compete, and then they all start dying. Brilliant. Sign me up.
Oh my gosh, I forgot to mention The Burning.
Oh
It's been such a long
yeah,
time since I've seen it, honestly.
same. But it's got like a baby Holly Hunter in it, or is it Jennifer Jason Lee? Which one is it?
Holly Hunter and
Yeah,
baby Jason Alexander.
yeah. It's one that isn't it quite nasty?
I
Like
believe
it's a pretty
so.
mean spirited one, but obviously it's total cult item.
From what I remember.
It's got the guy with the giant pair of gardening shears.
Right, well, are we ready to talk horror books?
I'm ready.
I can start us off with You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Barron. So, this follows a girl named Charity who works her dream job at this summer camp where she gets to essentially like play the final girl. It's this like full immersion slasher role play. Like, someone is cast as like the killer and someone's cast as the final girl. And you get to like, if you're a camper, you get to be like one of the campers and be like kind of a part of the story, which I'm sorry, I would do in a heartbeat. Like, that is absolutely something I would sign up to do.
Oh wow. I mean,
Wouldn't you?
I love the concept for a book, but I would not be going anywhere near that camp. No
No.
way. No,
I
like, did you?
unfortunately would fall prey to this.
Yeah. Did you ever do the Universal Monsters Horror Nights thing that they do, where you get like locked in like a hallway with
Mhm.
like Freddy, Jason, Ghostface, Hannibal Lecter, maybe? Like, this is a while back that they used to do this, but you get like chased and stuff, and I just really I don't need that.
Have you ever done those like walk through haunted houses?
Yes. And embarrassed myself completely because I grabbed hold of a stranger to like. I'm not sure if was either using them as a human shield or just sort of like scared that I needed to grab somebody, but it didn't look good.
I am also a wimp in those. And it sucks, right? Because like probably in our friends groups, we're like the horror people.
Oh yeah, like put me down in front of a screen and I won't move. I don't jump or
Shut down.
scream or shout. But if it's
No.
in real life, mm-mm.
um yeah, that's how it goes. But so Charity has this job, being this final girl, doing this very like elaborate role play deal, except as you can imagine in the story, it all starts to go wrong. Her coworkers start disappearing and people start winding up like real dead, not like actor play dead. Like, they are dead. And so Charity is unfortunately forced into the role of like, oh no, I have to be like a real life final girl and like get to the bottom of this and like keep everyone safe and try to be one step ahead of the killer and find out where to run to for help and figure out what is causing this and how to make it stop.
Yeah, yeah.
This was a fun time.
It's so fun. It's so pacey. I just like inhaled it completely in a couple of days. The concept is genius. I loved the main character. I thought she was brilliant. I loved it when her friends show up to sort of like help her out, and then it all just goes wrong. Um, and it's like a really fun mystery that goes in
Yeah.
a direction that is so completely unexpected.
Yes. It really is. I could
Like,
not
did
imagine
not
missing
see
it.
that coming at all.
For that, I would say this is for me is between room temperature and fridge because it is, I don't know, it is very fast paced and there's high stakes.
Yeah, and there's a really, really creepy moment involving a house and an elderly lady that
Yeah.
is really quite creepy.
So that is You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Barron.
My first book is The Lake House by Sarah Beth Durst, and it's a YA horror novel about three teenagers called Claire Ray. Is it Reva or Rava? I'm not sure. But forgive me. And Mariana, and they head to a remote island for a stay at a summer camp. However, when they arrive, they discover that the lodge has been burned to the ground and nobody appears to have survived the fire. And then they find a body, but the body appears to also have been shot. So they find themselves stranded alone on this island, no way out, no way to get off this island. They have to figure out a way to survive while also worrying that there's a killer watching them from the woods. Um, this is like this is basically survivalist horror. I like it's the amount of detail, the level of detail that Durst goes into is so impressive. It's really funny because the author says in her acknowledgements at the end that she has zero survival skills. But, I totally believed that she could hold her own in the woods because she must have researched the hell out of this. Um, but it's like the girls can't drink the lake water because it could carry diseases among other, gross things. There's no food anywhere, so they basically have to survive on the snacks that they had in their backpacks when they were on their way to the camp. Um, and yeah, it's basically about how horrific it would be to try to survive in the wild, and then you throw in the potential killer in the woods as well. It's really, really cool idea. Have you
It
read this
sounds
one?
really good. I haven't read this one.
It's
I'm
fun.
adding
It's
it to
fun.
my list.
Yeah, it's the thing that really like drew me in was the cover because
Mhm.
it shows a girl's face, but her eyes are covered by this like spooky motif of a shadowy figure in the woods, and it's just so eerie. It's really effective. And the characters, like it is very much like a character based story.
Mhm.
So I really related to Claire because she's like she really suffers with anxiety, and I don't think the book spells out that she has OCD, but she definitely displays sort of OCD like behavior. Like she's constantly ruminating on things that could go wrong. She's always looking out for danger. No matter if she's just sitting on a boat, she's thinking about all the ways the boat could kill her. Like she does things like counting and triple checking and stuff. So I really liked her. I thought she was really likable, and the other characters are great as well. So, but because it is so much about them and like their attempts to survive and their coming of age sort of chats, I would say it's probably room temperature. But there is an underground bunker pretty early on that is pure horror movie. So maybe it'll be like in the fridge sometimes. So that was The Lake House by Sarah Beth Durst.
Ooh, I will be checking that one out.
Mm.
Okay, my next pick is The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. This is about Mars, and he's always described himself as the lesser twin, always in shadow to his sister Caroline. But Caroline dies under horrific circumstances. So after her horrific death, he finds himself propelled to learn as much as he can about Caroline and like the secrets she was keeping. They'd grown distant in the last few years, and Mars is gender fluid, so he finds himself often excluded from certain traditions. But he decides to go back to Aspen Conservancy Summer Camp Academy, which is
Mm.
as stuffy as it sounds.
Yeah.
But his sister had poured a lot of her time there, so he insists on attending in her place. But he finds himself drawn to this group of girls called the Honeys, and they tend to the beehives behind their cabin. Like they're apiarists. Um, and they're just kind of like this very interesting, kind of like ethereal, like exclusive, like popular girl group. Um, and just really getting into when we find out he also has history at this camp. Like, this is not his first run in with these people, and he is on a mission to figure out like what is going on here, what connections they have to his sister, what they're hiding. And I did enjoy that as a protagonist. He was on it. He was on
Mm.
the case. I'm actually putting this in the fridge. There are several scenes that I thought were pretty horrifying, like body horror, that I
Oh,
was kind of
nice.
not expecting going in.
Uh-huh.
But absolutely loved it and had a really good time with it. This really did scratch that like summer camp itch, and also that kind of like preppy, like boarding school, like exclusive upper class summer camp thing. And also, yeah, I mean, having like a gender fluid protagonist who's like fighting back against these, like, as you can imagine, in these institutions, very rigid gender structures and very patriarchal, very white.
Yeah.
And so very fun to have a protagonist like kicking back against this.
Yeah, awesome. I love how we're obsessed as a culture by those like cool teenage groups.
Hmm.
Like we had the Heathers, then we had the Plastics.
Hmm.
The Honeys is a great name for
Honey,
like a
yeah.
yeah, that's such a great name.
All right, so that is The Honeys by Ryan LaSala.
My second book is Eat Your Heart Out by Kelly DeVos. And this is like another YA. All my books for some reason are YA. I don't know if it's just that summer camp horror kind of is more
I think all
populated
of
in.
mine are too.
Oh wow,
All of
okay,
mine are
cool.
YA.
I guess a lot of them are summer camps are about young people, so that would make sense.
Yeah.
Um, so this one is described by the publisher as Shaun of the Dead meets Dumplin', which is completely accurate.
I'm
Um,
I'm fascinated now.
yeah, it's I loved this book. It was so fun. It's set at a so-called fat camp, which I'm using in inverted commas, and it sees a bunch of teenagers head to a remote camp in Arizona where they are supposed to sort of lose weight over a number of weeks. But on their way there, there's a freak snowstorm that blows in, which obviously Arizonans aren't especially prepared for, being a desert state.
Yeah.
Um, so that kind of makes things kind of tricky. And even worse, when they get to camp, the kids glimpse this emaciated figure running through the woods that just nobody wants to sort of admit is a problem. Everyone's like, "Oh, it was a bear," or whatever, and it's like, no, that wasn't a bear. Um, and then they're instructed to start eating these like weird nutrition bars that are definitely not approved by any kind of governing uh, endorsed body, and they do refuse to eat them to certain characters that we follow. But then all hell breaks loose as zombies attack the camp. So this is another one that is just so pacey. The action kicks off pretty much immediately, and
Hmm.
the narrative cycles through multiple POVs. So there's Viv, who is the smart, like the super smart badass, and just doesn't take shit from anyone. Um, and I loved her. She's awesome. She's like strong and confident, and she's plus size, and she can be all those things. She doesn't have to. Um, Often when somebody is portrayed as sort of like a misfit or whatever, they're not allowed to be strong and independent and cool. But Viv completely is. There's Ali, who is the wannabe actor, and she has a history with Viv. There's Miller, who's this hot jock who just started working at the camp. Um, and all of the counselors at the camp, they're all like blonde, blue-eyed, very sort of traditionally attractive, super sinister, clear political undercurrent going on there. Um, and yeah, there's like then there's Paul, whose dad runs this big pharma company that are sponsoring the camp, who clearly have their own insidious agenda. And as the book progresses, you start to learn why there are zombies at camp, what's really going on, and it's just brilliant. It's really fun.
It sounds really good. I'm surprised I hadn't heard of this one.
Yeah, it's got a great cover. I'm gonna keep going on about the amazing covers. It's got a really cool like atmospheric cover, bright pink and yellow. Um, and it's like another I'm a sucker for like a postmodern
Oh
narrative.
my gosh, yeah,
So
I'm
this
looking
was
it up
one that like
now.
plays around with horror conventions, and like right up top, DeVos lays out the archetypal roles that you see in Friday the 13th. And there's this like fun mystery of like who actually at the camp fits those roles. So there's things like
Hmm.
the jock, the jerk, the nerd, the courageous captain, the outcast, and it's like, what do those roles tell us about these archetypes and these characters, and who's going to survive and who isn't? It's fun.
I'm adding that to my list immediately. You
Yay,
are
cool.
adding to my list.
Yay. I think this one probably belongs in the fridge because it is atmospheric and spooky, and there is some gore. And there's like a few little jump scares and stuff. I wouldn't say it's properly all out terrifying,
Mhm.
but it's good. Like it's good fun horror.
Love it. It looks good, and like you mentioned, that cover is
Mm.
incredible. I want it.
Very cool. So that was Eat Your Heart Out by Kelly DeVos.
Perfect. All right, my final official pick is The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson. This is in the Truly Devious series of YA books, and the truliest devious. Wow, the truly devious plot line kind of wraps up in its like trilogy, and then this is the first book that takes place after those events have all been wrapped up in the trilogy, and so we are following amateur sleuth Stevie Bell, who I love, and not just because her name is Stephanie and she is also from Pittsburgh and has anxiety and loves horror. Um, but like,
Whoa!
why wouldn't I
Someone
love
wrote your
her?
life.
I know. But amateur sleuth Stevie Bell needs a good murder. After catching a killer at her high school, she's back at home for a moment. And that means a boring summer. Until she gets a message from the owner of Sunny Pines, formerly known as Camp Wonderfalls, the site of the notorious unsolved case, the Box in the Woods murders. Where back in 1978, four camp counselors were killed in the woods outside the town. Their bodies were left in a gruesome display, and the new owner offers Stevie an invitation to come to camp and help him work on a true crime podcast about the case.
Mm.
Stevie agrees as long as she can bring along her friends from Ellingham Academy. But something evil still lurks in Barlow Corners. When Stevie opens the lid on this long dormant case, she gets much more than she bargained for. And she may not
Mm.
make it out alive.
Yeah, and her friends are their days are numbered, I think.
Yeah.
I
But
love it when there's like a way to like get the cast numbers up. It's like her friends have to come with her for some reason to not be killed.
I do love that. I want to say it does make sense
Uh,
in the story because she does have a lot of anxiety, and so like going to a new place, like that's kind of her offer. She's like, "I'll go if you let me bring my friends to
yeah.
help me."
To use as a shield.
um, to use the shield to help me solve this mystery. These books are really fun. They tend to be a bit more on the room temperature side because I would say like they aren't trying to be horror books. I would say they probably are more in the like murder mystery. Like I'm a, more of like a Hercule Poirot type character. It is fun because she's like this like famous teen sleuth now. And so, they're like offering to fly her out. And the guy's like, "Oh, we're sponsored by, this like meal kit service, and we're gonna have to record ads, and we're gonna have to like do this whole true crime podcast about this thing." It is just really fun to have her do this and look into this like old like camp counselor murder case. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, was she like closer than she should have gotten? Mm. And if you've like read the series, there's obviously of course like a big like romance kind of love interest thing that of course like has its plot line here. Um there's another book after this where she goes to England. Um and then that was left on a cliffhanger, and I'm still waiting for another book after that. So
Mm. What does she do in England? Have fry-ups, drink pints.
she's going to visit her boyfriend.
She sounds like a great character. I love a teen sleuth like Veronica
Yes,
Mars. It's just so great.
it is good. And that original trilogy where she essentially gets accepted into this like very exclusive academy in Vermont, and her like special interest is like true crime. and crime. And so she says for her senior project, she's going to solve the infamous murder of this
Mm.
infamous unsolved murder that took place at the boarding school. And it is like all 3 books.
Oh, great. That sounds brilliant.
It is. It's a fun time, and it is like when Maureen Johnson announces books, I am there, seated,
Yeah.
ready. So, but Box in the Woods was a really fun time, and I think a really fun way to get this kind of like murder mystery into like summer camp horror setting. The two meet
Yeah.
up.
That's a horrible
Um,
idea. Like the bodies were arranged in a box in the woods. Just, it's very Hannibal.
yeah, and there's like dioramas with like little
Oh,
models and stuff left too.
whoa.
Yeah.
Better bring your
So
friends along.
it's got to be the whole Scooby Gang, okay? So that is The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson.
My last pick is Camp Fear by Carol Ellis. And I'm going to tell you the tagline, which is "The past can't hurt you, it can kill you," which is
Mm.
slightly misleading because, spoiler alert, nobody actually dies in this book. Um, it's one of those point horror stories, which
I
obviously are
love
like,
that.
yeah, like those early 80s, 90s teen horror novels. R.L. Stine was a huge contributor to the series. And this one is set at Camp Silver Lake, where Rachel Owens is just one of the counselors who shows up there to spend a couple of days preparing the camp before the kids arrive. So far, so Friday the 13th. But she quickly learns that most of the other counselors already know each other from when they were campers there 7 years ago. And they're hiding a dark secret about what happened to one of their fellow campers who died that year. And meanwhile, somebody is stalking the woods, dead set on turning the campers' fears against them in an attempt to literally scare them to death. So this came out in 1993, which is like over a decade after the first Friday the 13th came out. And it definitely feels like baby's first slasher. It's sort of like Training Wheels slasher. So it's
Mhm.
like things are kind of scary, but they're not like absolutely terrifying. Nobody dies. There's no blood. Um, the stalking that goes on is relatively inconsequential, and yeah, like it's just very light Friday the 13th. Like the kid who died was bullied, and somebody's out to get revenge. So it's very much sort of a kid version of that movie. But it's still fun. Like there are scary pranks. Like there are snakes in beds, and one of the campers is like afraid of slugs or something. So the stalker puts wet leaves in the sleeping bag, like which I guess feel like slugs. Um, don't know why they couldn't use real slugs. Maybe they weren't in season. Um, but Rachel is like a great final girl. She's really straightforward and smart, but she also, if there's like a lull, like if there's like an awkward silence, she just starts babbling, which I can completely relate to. Um, and she also like she actually gets to do some cool like action movie stuff, which not a lot of the main characters in, especially the female main characters in point horror, they didn't really get to do much of that. They were more kind of like scared and needed saving, or very timid and wallflowery. But Rachel like gets to save her friend from a boat, but she also does jump at noises quite a lot as well. So, and she also no, she also goes out in the woods without a flashlight, which is pretty darn brave. Or is it stupid?
Yeah.
I don't
Depends on how
know.
successful she was.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually quite funny as well. Like there's a line. One of the counselors, Stacy, she's afraid of drowning, but she still goes out on the lake in a boat with the other counselors, and of course they play a horrible prank on her. And one of the guys is like, "If she's so afraid of the water, why'd she go out in the boat?" And Stacy's like, "Because I'm not scared of boats," which I think is a very good distinction. But yeah, this one is like very room temperature. But if you're thinking about, if your kids might be potentially into horror, sort of like maybe giving them a bit of light horror reading to see if they enjoy it, then you couldn't go wrong with putting this into their hands.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So
I
that's
did not read too many of the point horror books.
did you because you obviously you had all the Fear Streets and you had Goosebumps.
I had Goosebumps. I think Fear Street came out, I think, kind of around this a little before or around the same time as Goosebumps. So those were like the cool teen books, and I was very much like a middle grade aged reader.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know why. In my teen years, I think I read like a handful of Fear Street, but I didn't like really get into Fear Street either.
Yeah.
I kind of missed that. So now, like,
Oh,
I'm kind of like now going back and like on some of these
yeah.
down. But yeah, like Point Horror. I don't know if it was as big here.
Yeah, it was huge in the UK. I think because Stephen King was massive at that time as well, and
Mhm.
horror was just generally really quite big, I think, in like the late 80s, early 90s. And it was something that got definitely got me reading. I'd go into
Mhm.
WH Smith's, and you'd look at all those colorful covers, and they had really cool illustrations, and the type font was always very gnarly and cool. Um, and they were like quite cheap. Like they were like 2.99, which
Wow.
I'm obviously that's before inflation, but
Still,
relatively cheap.
you know.
And obviously they were in libraries and stuff. So yeah, there are a lot of people my age who just look back so fondly at point horrors. I guess in the same way
Oh,
you do with Goosebumps.
yeah. Oh, definitely. Speaking of Goosebumps, there's like three different Goosebumps that take place at camps.
Yes. I'm reading one this week because I'm doing a podcast about it. But
Which one is it? Which one of the three?
is it Welcome to Camp Nightmare?
That one is my favorite. Yeah, Welcome to Camp
Ah,
Nightmare. Then there's The Curse of Camp Cold Lake and Ghost Camp.
whoa. I know that.
Yeah,
Are they all very different?
they are pretty different.
R.L. Stein, he
Yeah,
really.
he was cranking them out. But oh, in a book that came out that is coming out this year, Midwestern Gothic by Scott Thomas. Did you read Kill Creek by him?
No, but
Okay.
I've seen the cover a lot.
Yeah, so he has like a collection of novellas coming out this year called Midwestern Gothic. Um, and there is one novella in there called The Boy in the Woods, which follows a boy who has a facial deformity and he is at a summer camp. And like, everyone's been picked up, but he and like another girl are stuck there for like an extra day waiting for their parents. And
Mm.
something starts infecting everyone.
Ugh. That sounds great.
It was really good. It's a
There's
great
something.
collection.
Oh, cool. There is something creepy about, like, my parents were both teachers, and I used to spend a lot of time after school had finished in empty schools. And
Oh,
there is
yeah.
something quite creepy about being places that are usually really busy and well populated that
Yeah.
then suddenly get quiet.
It's like
So,
a
like, that
liminal
camp sounds,
space.
yeah, exactly. Like, what even is this place now?
Then one I read quite a long time ago um, is The Summer is Over and We Are Not Yet Saved by Joey Comeau. Have you read that one?
I haven't read it, but Rob on Arc Party, was it Rob? Yes, I think it was Rob. He recommended that to me just last week, and it sounds so good.
It's like a single mom gets a job doing like special effects for a horror movie, and she's trying to find like childcare for her son. And I think it's her parents or her parents know someone that runs a like religious summer camp that will like
Mm.
watch her, that her son can attend, and that will, he'll have something to do while she takes this job. And of course, there is a slasher at this Bible camp set loose, and you're also getting like letters from the mom being like, "Here's how I'm doing at my job. Like, hope everything's great with you." Um, And I remember this one was very heartbreaking and sad because the campers are like children.
Oh,
It's
what?
dark. Like they are not teens, they are children.
Yeah.
It's
That's something
it's a sad one.
that was something that happened with Fear Street 1978. Like those kids are like middle grade kids and they get brutally butchered. That nerd with the glasses who just wants to be everyone's friend and like keeps making bad jokes gets like axe murdered.
Sad, sad.
Yeah.
Um, and then one that I want that is on my TBR, and I would say it's not summer camp, but it's like outdoor camping, so summer camp adjacent,
Mm.
is Hiding Lies by Stephanie Rose.
Mm.
But that's about a like forensic photographer who's assigned this like case where this couple was camping and was murdered, and it kind of has this like kind of kind of seems like Mayfly you type
Oh
ending
wow.
where she's like, "Oh, am I more connected to this than I thought?" Yeah.
Mm.
It seems like it
That
gets
sounds
dark,
cool.
and I'm into that. It's got like a tent on
Yeah.
the cover, but
Yeah.
it's coming out like this Halloween week. Sounds fun.
Awesome. Cool. I have a couple that I haven't read yet, disclaimer, but they're definitely on my radar. There's Welcome to Camp Killer by Cynthia Murphy. And I think yeah, she had some books out in the US this year, I think. She does like teen horror, really cool. And in this one, an American style summer camp is set up on a British estate. Um, and there are like accidents at the camp, and there's the question of if it's murder or not. And it's just like I think it's a novella. It's not a full novel, but it just looks really fun. Summer Camp for Slasher Victims by Matthew Mercer.
Okay.
It's got a it's got like a flaming marshmallow on the cover with like stabbed onto the end of a knife, which is just awesome.
I'm obsessed with that.
Yeah. And it's set at a camp for trauma survivors where there's a killer lurking and the campers are like forced to relive their worst life experiences. So that sounds all kinds of fun.
Yeah.
And then there's Cuckoo by Gretchen Felker Martin, who also wrote Manhunt, which was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've started reading Cuckoo, and the first chapter is just like whiplash. It hits so hard and it's so good. It's just like, oh, it's just, I won't spoil it, but it's amazing. But it's a
Is
book set
this
at
the
a,
conversion?
right, yeah. Yeah, it's like set at a so-called queer conversion camp. And it's just been getting lots of like rave reviews. So yeah, I can't wait to
Mm.
dive into that one.
You'll have to let me know when you finish it what you thought.
Have you seen it? Sorry, have you read it?
I haven't read it, but it's on my
Oh, okay.
radar.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll let you know.
Also, I think we both had on here The Last Time I Lied
Oh, yes.
by Riley Sager.
Yeah. I haven't read it in a long, long
I
time.
don't mean either.
Yeah. But I read it when it
I
first came out.
yeah, I did do a summer camp horror episode several years ago, and I think this was one of the picks
Oh,
in the
cool. Oh my God.
episode.
So we're like the Friday the 13th part two of your summer
This is
camp
Friday.
podcasts.
Mhm.
Yes.
uh, yeah, 2019.
Whoa. Congratulations on
Uh,
being on the air for so long.
so it is Kill River, The Con Season, Kill Hill Carnage, The Wild Ones, and Under the Blade by Matt Serafini.
Oh, yes. Kill, River, and Under the Blade. I have both of those. And yeah, I'm desperate to
They're
read those.
fun. They're good. I
Oh,
definitely
cool.
recommend them.
Kill River. I remember seeing the author. He's indie, right?
Yes.
I remember seeing him. He did a video of like how he manufactures his books. I don't know if he still does it this way, but because he wanted a very specific like paperback size, He like
Yeah, they're like
trims
the mass
them
market
and
size. Yeah.
yeah, and he puts so much work into
That's
each
interesting.
book.
And he paints the covers, like they're all his paintings.
Yeah, like collector's items.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's like three of the Kill River books. Then he's done like Disco Death Trap, and then there's like a golf slasher. It's fun. um,
I'm waiting for
yeah.
Stephen Graham Jones to do a camp slasher. I really want to read his take on that because
Oh my gosh, I can't believe he hasn't done one.
yeah, it's just prime for his taking. I would absolutely kill to read that
Oh, for sure. All right. Well, are we ready to talk chilling obsessions?
completely. So
All
ready.
right. What
Uh,
have you been enjoying?
you actually mentioned it pretty much at the top of the podcast, which was probably my fault because
Oh.
I mentioned Diablo Cody. But my current obsession is Lisa Frankenstein,
Yay.
which got a very limited release in the UK. I think it also got quite a limited release in the US.
Oh.
Um, but yeah, it's like a teen horror comedy, very much in the vein of Beetlejuice and Heathers. And it stars Catherine Newton as Lisa Frankenstein, whose mother was killed by by an axe murderer. Um, yeah, I can't remember if it was a
I
year ago or a few years ago. Yeah, it's wild.
I kept waiting for them to say that that, like, wasn't real, and, at
Yeah.
the end of the movie, I was like, "Oh, no, wait, her mom really was killed by an axe murderer?"
It's-
Like, I thought it was one of those weird, like, urban legend things that, like, it was
yeah,
gonna get cleared up later what really happened. So I
yeah.
was like, "Oh, no, that was real?"
Oh, that really happened. Horrific, but very entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, explains the trauma, but yeah.
Completely, yeah. That's the thing, it does kind of explain her wild behavior as the film progresses. Um, basically, she's obsessed. She's like that kind of like nerdy outsider at school. She's new at school because she transferred. She's now in the same school as her stepsister because her dad remarried to this awful new stepmother. And Lisa like is obsessed with graveyards. She sort of does like she like does engraving
Like,
rubs,
etchings. Yeah.
etchings. Thank you.
Yeah.
And one night during a storm, this grave that she's been hanging out around gets hit by lightning, and the young man who's been lying in repose for decades comes back to life and tracks her down, and then they kind of have this like beautiful romance, which does involve murder and hacking off body parts. And it's just great. It's just like an absolute joyful
I
horror
bet it's
hug.
lovely.
Yeah, it's so lovely. It doesn't fuck around with like, it doesn't follow real world logic in a lot of ways.
No.
They do stuff that the police would be there in a heartbeat, kind of thing. But it's lovely that they just don't bother with it. It's a fairy tale.
I mean, he becomes more human in the, like, tanning bed, which I love. I love the tanning bed.
Yes, the magical tanning bed.
The magical tanning bed.
Yeah.
Put it on ultra bronze.
Yeah. Isn't it called there's like a logo on the tanning bed that says something like life-giving or so it's got a very funny pun on there anyway.
Oh man, I love it. Lisa Frankenstein was such a fun time. My
Yeah.
chilling obsession is another Catherine Newton film,
Whoa.
Abigail.
Oh, I've not seen it yet.
It's really fun. It's essentially this group of criminals are like hired to take on this like one job, and this job is to like kidnap this young girl and take her to like this secluded manor where like they essentially have to watch her and wait until her wealthy father responds about ransom money. And nobody, like, the criminals, like, don't know each other's names. No one knows anything. They're really not supposed to know, like, who this girl is or like who her father is. Um, and I mean, it's given away in the trailer.
Hmm.
But this child is a vampire ballerina. And these criminals did not know what they had signed up for, and she starts attacking
It's such a great idea.
them.
So
So
great.
just
It's like, be careful what you wish for.
vampire ballerina.
Yeah, just brilliant. It's genius. And then you've got
I'm
like
just
two cinematic final girls. You've got Catherine Newton and you've got Melissa Barrera.
Melissa Barrera. And also this child actress, I don't know who she is, but she kills it with the teeth and the growling and the little dances and the
Mm,
attitude, like perfect on all counts. She
yeah.
was great.
Oh, I can't wait to watch that film. I'm desperate.
It is bloody. Like I can't, like, at the end of the movie, like everyone is just covered in blood. I'm like, perfect. This is actually what cinematic perfection is. It's just
Yeah,
everyone just covered in blood.
yeah. Like the end of the Evil Dead reboot when she's used that chainsaw and she is just absolutely could not get another drop on her.
Like everyone looks like they've hopped out of the like descent pool.
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. So that was a ton of fun. And that I think just started streaming on Peacock this week.
Mm,
I think was just available for streaming.
awesome.
All right. Well, our second tradition is to ask our guests for a final girl song. So
Yeah,
what are we bumping this week?
my final girl song is going to be a track called The Fury by Starcadian.
Okay.
It's from his album Midnight Signal's original motion picture score, which has been fueling my writing for like at least 2 years. And it always confused me. I've never looked into it, but it is called Midnight Signal's original motion picture score. But Midnight Signals
Hmm.
is not a movie. It's
This is
all part
fascinating.
of yeah. It's a really cool thing that he's doing. But like so, Starcadian, I didn't even know anything about him actually before I did some research for this podcast. But he describes his music as ear movies, where
Oh.
he yeah, like EAR movies. He says, I basically make soundtracks to imaginary movies that I wish I'd seen when I was younger. And so they're
Hmm.
all like synthy 80s, but also kind of very modern sounding, um, just perfection, basically. Love them. So
Wow.
yeah,
And so they
super
don't have
atmospheric.
are they like no words, just like
Some of them do have words.
okay.
So he
Just
does what he does is like before he writes an album, he sits down and he plots out a fake film, and then he kind of workshops that film until it makes sense, and then he writes the music for that film. So that means that there are sort of certain tracks that sound like needle drops by an artist you've
interesting.
never heard of.
I'm obsessed with this whole process.
It's really cool,
It
isn't it?
seems like so much work, but it also feels like
Yeah,
it's the type of thing where you can, when you listen, you can tell that it was this much thought that went into it.
yeah, exactly. It's completely unique.
Wow.
He's also
Interesting.
like he does work in movies. He's like a visual effects programmer. I don't know which ones specifically. I'm not even sure that anyone knows what his real name is. I didn't dig that deep. But yeah, he does work in the movies. But he says that it's less fulfilling than creating music. So
Interesting. Well, I
yeah,
will be adding that to the playlist.
awesome.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and talking to me about summer camp horror.
Thank you. It's been so fun, and I'm so happy that summer camp horror is like having a weird little moment
Yeah,
this year. It's
a little.
great.
It is. So everyone, I think by the time this episode comes out, you will be able to get your own copy of Heads Will Roll. So get on it. Go roast some marshmallows.
Yeah. And duck.
Books in the Freezer is a bi-weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Books in the Freezer, or send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. Show notes for this episode and all previous episodes are at booksinthefreezer.com, where you will find a list of all the books mentioned, as well as links to several different ways you can show your support for Books in the Freezer, ranging from affiliate links, things like Libro FM and Fangoria, to our Patreon, which has 3 levels of support, to, of course, merch, because you got to show your support by wearing a What's Your Final Girl Song shirt or t-shirt or mug. Check that out at the TeePublic link on our show notes at, once again, booksinthefreezer.com. And remember, there are also ways to show your support for the podcast, which do not involve spending any money. And one of those ways is leaving a review on a site like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So big thanks to those of you who have taken the time to do that already. I have been your host, Stephanie Gagne. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time on Books in the Freezer.